His name was Dr. Harold Torvik. I practiced medicine in Dodge County, Nebraska, from 1919 through the end of World War II. On the morning of January 4th, 1933, he sat at his desk and opened a leather-bound ledger with a broken spine. That ledger holds 47 entries for the month of January. 6 patients paid in US dollars, 41 paid in chickens, flour, potatoes, firewood, eggs, soap, or labor. One entry reads, Olson family, influenza, 3 children. Treated over 4 house calls. Payment received, 2 hens, 1 sack of flour, 10 pounds of potatoes, and a promise to repair the fence in spring. That promise was kept. Dr. Torvik never missed a meal during the Great Depression. His neighbor, the bank manager, lost his farm, lost his house, and spent the winter of 1933 living in a converted chicken coop. Same town, same depression, same collapse. One man ate eggs from his own chickens. The other ate charity soup. The difference was what each man offered the world, measured in different units. This is not a story about luck. It is a story about what happens when debt exceeds the capacity to repay. The dollar did not collapse in 1933. What collapsed was the assumption that the dollar would remain the only medium of exchange. Torvik's ledger is not a record of hardship. It is a forensic document. It records a parallel economy that operated in plain sight, without a central bank, and kept millions of people fed and treated while the official system flatlined. The question is not whether this pattern will repeat. The question is whether you understand what his ledger says about your own skills. Let me take you through the data. In 1929, the average American physician earned about $4,500 per year. By 1933, that cash income had fallen to $800, a drop of 60%. But cash was not the full picture. 1934 AMA survey found that 73% of physicians accepted barter. In rural areas, barter made up more than half of a doctor's total compensation. Urban doctors saw about 30% in goods. The survey listed what doctors received: food, fuel, clothing, furniture, rent, livestock, farm equipment, and labor. One Iowa doctor was paid in a dairy cow. He kept it for milk and butter, then traded the surplus for firewood. That cow was never valued in dollars. It did not need to be. It produced value directly. Now compare that to a bank teller, a stockbroker, or a real estate agent. Those professions saw cash income fall by 80 to 90%, with no alternative stream. A stockbroker could not accept chickens. Chickens cannot be listed on the New York Stock Exchange. They cannot be deposited in a bank. The broker's skill depended entirely on a functioning financial market. When that market froze, the skill had zero value. The doctor's skill did not freeze. A man with pneumonia needs treatment whether the bank is open or not. That treatment does not require a stock exchange. It requires a person who knows how to listen to a chest, prescribe something that might work, and sit with the family. That skill cannot be seized. It cannot be inflated away. It cannot be made worthless by a bank holiday. Dr. Torvik understood this. He kept chickens. He grew vegetables. He knew how to repair a fence. But his primary asset was his medical knowledge, and his community needed it more in 1933 than in 1928. The bank manager's primary asset was his position in a system that routed capital from savers to borrowers. When the system stopped routing, his position became ceremonial. He could still wear a suit, but no one needed what he offered. That is what blows people's minds. The barter economy of the Great Depression had rules. It had exchange rates. It had price discovery. Dr. Torvik's ledger shows that a house call, 1 to 2 hours including travel, was worth about 1 bushel of corn in 1933. Bushel of corn sold for about 30 cents. That same house call, paid in cash in 1929, would have been billed at $3 to $4. So the doctor's real income in corn equivalent terms fell nearly 90%. But he was still earning something. The bank manager's real income in corn equivalent terms fell to 0. The doctor ate at a lower standard of living. The manager did not eat at all. The ledgers tell us something else. The barter economy discriminated by skill type, not by race or class. 1935 study of barter in rural Minnesota tracked 243 transactions. The professions that successfully bartered were doctors, dentists, veterinarians, teachers, lawyers, carpenters, mechanics, and blacksmiths. The ones that did not: bankers, brokers, insurance agents, and accountants. The reason is simple. A dentist can pull a tooth. A mechanic can fix a roof. But an insurance agent cannot insure a chicken coop when the owner has no cash. The insurance company does not accept eggs. The agent's product required dollars. The dentist product did not. Now step outside the United States. Weimar Germany, 1923. The mark fell from 320 per dollar in July 1922 to 4.2 trillion per dollar by November 1923. Professor Julius Babb earned a monthly salary of 200,000 marks in January 1923. That bought what 100 marks had bought 2 years earlier. Effectively 0.05% of his previous real income. Cash salary workers were destroyed. But economist Costantino Bresciani Turoni documented that physicians, lawyers, and dentists who accepted goods instead of marks survived, with a 40 to 50% reduction in real consumption. Severe, but not fatal. Those who insisted on cash payment lost everything. The difference was the medium of exchange. Berlin physician named Dr. Eric Stern wrote a memoir in 1924. He described a patient who arrived in October 1923 with a wheelbarrow full of marks. Dr. Stern told him to take the money home and burn it for warmth. Then come back with something useful. The patient returned with a bag of potatoes. Dr. Stern treated him. The potatoes fed his family for 2 weeks. He noted that this was not charity. It was the market adjusting. Paper marks had become a liability. Potatoes had real value. His skill had real value. The transaction cleared without a government-controlled currency. The term for this is disintermediation. It means removing money itself as the middle layer. When currency becomes unreliable, people stop using it and revert to direct exchange. This is not primitive. It is an intelligent adaptation. A doctor's time is worth something real. Paper currency is only worth something if the government maintains the social contract. When that contract breaks, the economy does not disappear. It changes form. Transactions continue, but they stop being recorded in official statistics. Now the modern forensic record. In 2017, Researchers at the Central University of Venezuela documented the informal barter economy during hyperinflation. They interviewed 340 professionals in Caracas. Among physicians, 82% reported accepting goods or services. The average physician received 40% of compensation in US dollars and another 25% in food, medicine, or household goods. 35% was in bolivars. The researchers noted a dual pricing system: a nominal fee in bolivars for government records, and a real fee in dollars or goods for actual treatment. New. It was a parallel economy inside the official shell. The same study showed the collapse of the legal profession. By 2018, the average lawyer earned the equivalent of 47 per month in bolivars. Below the poverty line, lawyers could not easily barter because contracts required notarization, registration, and court fees paid in the official currency. If the bolivar collapsed during a 60-day closing period, the tax could exceed the house value. The legal system was wired to the currency. Lawyers were wired to the collapse. Doctors were not. A doctor can treat a patient, receive a bag of rice, and record nothing. That transaction is invisible, untaxable, and unaffected by the exchange rate. Same pattern, same stages, same outcome. Our harder case, the Siege of Sarajevo, 1992 to 1996. No electricity, no water, no fuel, no functional currency. The Yugoslav dinar became worthless within weeks. A man named Selko Begovic lived through the siege and documented the survival economy. The dominant currencies were German marks, cigarettes, and ammunition. But there was a fourth: skill. A doctor could not perform complex surgery without electricity or sterile instruments. But he could diagnose pneumonia, set a broken bone, treat an infected wound, and deliver a baby. That kind of doctor commanded food, firewood, and protection. The dentist, who could pull a tooth without Novocaine, commanded the same. The mechanic who repaired generators from scavenged parts commanded more. Selko described a corporate lawyer who could not trade his legal expertise. I had no access to courts, no clients. The legal system did not exist. I spent the siege trading his furniture for food, piece by piece, until he had nothing. Then he depended on charity. The mechanic who fixed generators never stopped working. His skill required only knowledge and hands. This is a forensic finding worth attention. Skills that survive collapse are not the highest paid in stable times. They are the ones that require the least external infrastructure. A surgeon needs a sterile operating room, anesthesia, and a supply chain. A general practitioner needs a stethoscope and basic medications. A corporate lawyer needs courts and contracts. A mechanic needs tools and a broken engine. A stockbroker needs a stock exchange. A farmer needs land and seeds. The skill's portability determines its survival. Not theory, not speculation. Historical fact. The ledger books, oral histories, and economic surveys from 5 collapses over 90 years all converge. The value of a skill in collapse is inversely proportional to the infrastructure it requires. Now the uncomfortable part. The same logic applies today. Question is not whether you have a skill. It is whether your skill can be exchanged without a functioning dollar system. If it only works when the banking system is operational, when the legal system is intact, when the government is solvent, then your skill carries systemic risk you have not priced in. Not because you are doing something wrong, because you built your career inside a system that assumes continuity. The Great Depression data shows the highest survival rates were not in the highest paid professions. They were in the most barterable ones. The 1934 Ferrer report. Physician unemployment peaked at 8%. Lawyers, 22%. Bankers and financial professionals, over 35%. The physicians who lost jobs were mainly specialists who needed hospital access. General practitioners, the ones who made house calls and accepted chickens, kept working. Their demand was biological, urgent, local, and payable in whatever the patient had. The implication is not that you should quit your job and become a doctor. It is that the structure of your skill, not its prestige, not its salary, but its relationship to infrastructure, determines your vulnerability. This is measurable, not technology, a decision you can make before the next shock. Here is the protocol that emerges from 4 collapses. Dr. Torvik's ledger, Stern's memoir, The Venezuelan Survey, and Selko's account converge on 5 categories of survivable skill. 1. Biological maintenance. Diagnosis, treatment, dentistry, veterinary care, midwifery, nursing. These skills are demanded by the human body, regardless of the economic system. In Venezuela, physicians who treated common infections were the most barterable. In Sarajevo, a man who could deliver a baby was worth more than a corporate lawyer. 2. Physical repair. Mechanics, electricians, plumbers, carpenters, welders, machinists. They maintained shelter, water, heat, and transportation. In Weimar Germany, a mechanic who repaired a farm tractor was paid in food and coal. In 1933, a carpenter who built a chicken coop was paid in eggs and firewood. 3. Food production and preservation. Farming, gardening, animal husbandry, butchering, seed saving. These skills produce calories, the most fundamental value. In the Depression, families with a garden and chickens had an advantage no cash could match. In Venezuela, urban gardeners ate 3 meals a day, while neighbors ate 1. 4. Education. Teaching, training, instruction in survival-relevant skills. It appears in every collapse. In Sarajevo, parents traded food for someone to teach reading and arithmetic. In Venezuela, English tutors got dollars and food. In the Depression, rural teachers were paid in goods. Education requires almost no infrastructure. A literate person, a willing student, a quiet space. 5. Security. Not violence, protection. Assessing risk, managing access, maintaining order when law enforcement is gone. In Sarajevo, neighborhood watch organizers were paid in food and shelter. In Venezuela, community leaders who mediated disputes were protected. It requires judgment, not weaponry. Now compare these to the professions that failed. Bankers, stockbrokers, real estate agents, insurance agents, corporate lawyers, financial advisors, tax accountants. Anyone whose skill is denominated in a specific currency or requires a functioning legal system. These are not bad professions. They pay well in stable times, but they carry structural risk. The forensic record answers the question. In every collapse, people with barterable skills and the willingness to accept non-monetary payment survived at higher rates. This is not a moral statement. It is an empirical finding from 80 years of economic autopsies. Dr. Harold Torvik died in 1957 at age 72. His obituary says he delivered over 1,200 babies, never turned away a patient who could not pay, and accepted unusual payment. His wife once told a reporter she learned to cook chicken 47 different ways, because that was what patients brought. She said it without bitterness. She said it with pride. The bank manager who lost everything in 1933 was Arthur Pendergast. He was 54 that year. After losing his home, he moved in with his daughter and worked as a bookkeeper for a grain elevator. But he never owned a house again. Died in 1942 at age 63. His obituary is 3 sentences long. Same town, same depression, same collapse. One man died in his own bed, surrounded by family and patients who brought food to the funeral. The other died in a rented room above a hardware store, survived by a daughter who had to borrow money to bury him. The difference was not intelligence. It was not work ethic. That was not luck. It was that one man offered a skill the world needed, regardless of whether the banks were open. The other offered a skill that required the banks to be open. Dr. Torvik's ledger is preserved in the Nebraska State Historical Society. The leather is cracked. The ink is faded, but the entries are still legible. January 1933. Olson family. 2 chickens, 1 sack of flour, 10 pounds of potatoes. 47 entries that month. 41 of them are not cash. Now go look at your own professional life through that ledger before you are forced to.